Let me bring up right now Dr. Kendrick Brown speaking on manifestations of Afrocentricity in hip hop.
What's up? So I don't specifically have a PowerPoint because I intend to actually convey a message. So I'm a recent graduate of Howard University with my doctorate in communication and culture. I specialize in sociolinguistics and I focus on Afrocentricity. I had the honor of having Dr. Molefi Asante as my external examiner, and so I thank God every day that he was willing to sign a paper for me to actually receive my PhD. So I just want to provide some context around the research that I'm going to talk about so that it would spark some sense of dialogue and understanding of how this research sort of came about and what it's grounded in. My academic advisor is Dr. Milborn Cummings, and Dr. Milborn Cummings participated in research that examined the manifestations of Afrocentricity in rap music. I come from a household where you pay respect to the people that have done the work before you, and it's very important for us to ground Afrocentric work in the work of other Afrocentric scholars. And so in keeping with that mantra, and in keeping with the mantra of academics and activism, I decided to engage in the work of investigating if Afrocentricity is actually manifested in hip-hop. So at the start of my paper, one of the things that I had to contemplate and realize was that to be pro-black is not an anti-white sentiment. White supremacy will get you to believe that it is, but to love yourself is not necessarily to hate someone else. And realizing that, one of the things that I really took hold of in terms of approaching this investigation was to understand the tenets of hip-hop that existed in the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace, which was created by hip-hop pioneers such as KRS-One, Pop Master Fabal, African Bombada, Ralph McDaniels, and several others. In the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace, some of the forefathers have begun to structure elements of black culture in the document to represent a type of doctrine that not only guided the behavior philosophically, theoretically, and in terms of its general discipline for all people of the hip-hop generation, but they also aim to dispel many of the myths that are associated with hip-hop. So, the commentary on this particular section of my paper is that, you have hip-hop as a culture and type of conscious that we engage in as part of our black culture. It's the expression of a new generation, the same that there was the Black Power movement, the same that there was the Civil Rights movement, and so a new generation has coined it and expressed it in its own lived experience for that time. The commercialization of hip-hop, however, of course tries to glorify all of the things that are negative about hip-hop to continue to reaffirm this sense of degradation that exists among black people, and it is not accurate. So investigating this particular declaration of peace, this declaration of hip-hop for manifestations of Afrocentricity, is to really talk about bringing about a sense of affirmation that there's no separation between hip-hop culture and black culture. There's no separation between Afrocentricity and black culture and hip-hop. It is all one and the same as people would try to get you to believe that Egypt is separate from Africa. It is not. So in investigating this particular subject, one of the things that I decided to do was make sure that I engaged in an Afrocentric method. And Asante 2009 explains that a phenomenon must be studied and analyzed in relationship to its psychological time and space. And in doing so, one of the really core elements of being able to examine the Declaration of Hip-Hop was to understand the purpose by which it was created. During the time by which it was created, it really spoke to an aspect of agency that needed to exist for the hip-hop generation. Now, I'll say that as a caveat, part of the issue is that and becoming very comfortable with the idea of having some civil liberties that don't translate into silver liberties, in essence, the silver spoon in our mouths, we've gotten laxed. And so someone like me looks at Dr. Molefi Asante, someone like me looks at Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, someone like me looks at a Cleo Monago as pioneers, people that really understood what the movement was about. But it means that we're also sometimes absent the real understanding of how to engage in a type of social activism that galvanizes and moves people to reaffirm their sense of agency without fear, without concern for exhaustion. And so what we do is create space when we don't engage in those types of things for people to allow these myths, these untruths about who we are, about what the new generation represents, to permeate and become real. And so we operate in this trance of white supremacy, unaware of the actualities that really exist that ground us in a sense of self-worth and self-value and appreciation for other people. So the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace was grounded in this idea that it needed to dispel many of the myths about hip-hop, since hip-hop was being commercialized to be something that was degrading to the general population of black people, especially our black female counterparts. And so, in the development of this document, there were 18 tenets. And to investigate these 18 tenets, my method of analysis engaged in the laws of Ma'at. Ma'at is about truth. It is about being able to stand firm in what it is that we know as a cultural component of our lived experience that governs how we act, how we interact, how we think about the world, and how we create, new barriers and bounds for our knowledge to be expressed in a variety of venues. So the examination of each of these 18 elements, now I promise you I won't take you through all 18, but I do give some examples. The examination of these were each weighed against something that related to the laws within Ma'at. Understanding that if a tenet exists and it is contrary to the laws of Ma'at, then it is in essence contrary to being grounded in an Afrocentric location. It is contrary to our blackness, which is easy to do when frankly you have a lot of black faces espousing Eurocentric ideologies and saying that that represents the black standard. So we have to be grounded. We have to question everything. We have to examine everything from an Afrocentric perspective and engage one another in the discipline of being grounded in what it is that we know as our own lived experience and truth, and not the adopted white supremacist perspectives that are oftentimes forced upon us, and then we just simply engage because we just are in a trance and don't realize that we don't know what we don't know because we don't care to take the time to do it because we think it's going to make us tired. So this endeavor, especially as it was really created at the precipice of my dissertation, became something that was really important to me. Going back to my, more specifically, it is the right order in nature and society, and established by an act of creation, and hence means according to the context that is right, that is correct, law, order, justice, and truth. Karenga, 2004. Using Ma'at, the first principle in the Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace suggests hip-hop is a term that describes our independent collective consciousness. Ever-growing, it is commonly expressed through such elements as breaking, MCing, graffiti art, DJing, beatboxing, street fashion, street language, otherwise known as ebonics, street knowledge, and street entrepreneurialism. Wherever and whenever these and future elements are expressions of hip-hop culture manifest, this Hip-Hop Declaration of Peace shall advise the use and interpretation of such elements as part of the lifestyle. That's the first element. It speaks to agency, it speaks to truth, and it speaks to a mode that is consistent with our cultural location rooted in Afrocentricity. The second principle, for example, suggests hip-hop culture embraces all life, particularly humanity. It is a reflection of Afrocentricity's we-ness, a promotion of family and community. Hip-hop culture respects the dignity and sanctity of life without discrimination or prejudice. Hip-hoppers, the hip-hop generation, shall thoroughly consider the protection and development of life over and before the individual decision to destroy or seek to alter its natural development. It is not anti-white to be pro-black. It is not anti-white to be pro-black. You can do both. You can only love other people when you begin to love yourself. So, with the principles examined, all 18, the findings of my research were that the 18 principles of the Declaration of Hip-Hop are consistent with the laws of Ma'at, therefore making them grounded and located in Afrocentricity. The conclusion of this work then concludes to suggest that the thing that we must always do, especially when we are talking about the commercialization of our work, which sometimes calls into question who it is that manages to present our ideas, our thoughts, our images, who depicts and determines how our ideas, thoughts, and images, the social discourse that exists around our thoughts and images are controlled by, must constantly be examined. We must not be afraid to hold each other accountable, to stay grounded in what we know is our own sense of cultural location. With 5 minutes left, I will say that the manifestations of Afrocentricity and hip-hop was actually a paper that I started before I finished my PhD. You know, after you finish your PhD, you look at your work and you just like, oh, no clue whatsoever. So some elements of this paper managed to change, and they also changed as I started to grow in relationship to conferences like these. I just want to echo a very important sentiment that was expressed that has bothered me and disturbed me deeply, but I'm glad that it came up here, and it is that, you know, when we make decisions about being scholars in academia, we cannot be afraid to also remain true to the aspect of activism at every level. It is not just about creating research and publications and silos that convey messages to the same audience that is able to understand epistemology, cosmology, axiology, and terms like that, but it's about coffee table conversations that exist at a very base level where people are trying to live and survive and have some sense of agency and understanding in their everyday interactions. It is at that place that we then transform people's lives, transform people's attitudes to believe that we have a black culture that is worth embracing and worth upholding, from their couches in their living rooms at home all the way to academic institutions that have begun to adopt, academic institutions that are historically black, universities and colleges that have begun to adopt and permeate itself with Eurocentric ideologies, providing no sense of opportunity for other Afrocentrics to be able to come and engage in a scholarly discourse. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for this conference.